Hi, and thank you for watching. My name is Mr. Upstone Bailey. I'm the head of computing. I'm also the associate assistant head teacher for digital strategy this year. This is a short webinar to talk about the use of generative AI tools for revision and how to best support students with that process of revising using these new tools. So when we're talking about AI tools and generative AI, we are talking about tools such as ChatGPT and Claude that are capable of creating new content in response to prompts from the user. And it will allow students to generate things like text, answer questions, explain ideas, almost like a digital tutor. Now, students will already be using these. It is a question of trying to make sure that they are using them in the right way, not from stopping them using them entirely. As I mentioned before, ChatGPT and Claude are two of the kind of more high profile examples. Google has Gemini built into a lot of its tools, and they also have Notebook LM. And then sites such as Quizlet and Seneca have AI features within them, particularly something like Quizlet, where it's capable of creating flashcards for the students to revise from. So, looking at how AI can support revision, it's important to remember that throughout all of it, the really crucial important thing is that the students need to be engaging with the material. This isn't a shortcut to suddenly have amazing revision notes and materials. The idea of using AI is to supplement that, to use it as a tool to help them think, not as a shortcut. So AI tools can be really, really fantastic at explaining concepts, approaching it from a different matter or direction, giving different scenarios, putting it into simple, clear language that the students can find much easier to understand. And this is a really helpful technique to be using with AI. In addition to this, it may well be that your child has exhausted their material of questions from the textbook or past papers, and so can use AI tools to generate past paper questions, kind of the same style, practice questions, so that they can keep testing themselves. Um, AI tools can obviously be used to create revision materials. So that might be taking a long piece of text and summarizing it. It could be producing outlines for particular topics, or even generating flashcards that they can then use on websites such as Quizlet or other flashcard tools. And allowing students to check or demonstrate their understanding using the AI tool as almost like a tutor, saying, "Tell me what you know about this." The student then does that, and the AI tool can then pick up on any misconceptions or maybe choice of language, and therefore kind of redirect and kind of probe and ask further questions. So we're going to look at some demonstrations here. So this one, we're going to use ChatGPT as a so I've got a prompt here that I've pasted in that I'd already written. It points out that I am a GCSE computer science student. I've specified which exam board, and that ChatGPT is going to work as an expert tutor. It's going to ask me one question at a time, and I've asked it to give me constructive feedback and then to adjust the subsequent questions based on my performance. So if I'm getting questions right, it will increase the difficulty. If I'm getting questions wrong, it will perhaps lower the difficulty of the questions that it's asking me. So this first question is about phishing emails. I have made a common student error here where I have misspelt phishing, so that I've used the normal spelling, not the computer science spelling. And then I've gone on to talk about some actual details of what should be looked for with a malicious email. So hopefully the response will correct my spelling, but will then give me credit for having got the answers right. So just finishing up my poor typing here. All typos are my own. It's not intended to look like student typing. So here's our response. And yes, it has identified that I'd not spelt it correctly for computer science. So in computer science, phishing attacks are with a PH. but it has identified that the rest of my answer was good. It's talked about a couple of things I could have also mentioned, and then has come up with the next question. This next question is asking about the difference between two different types of malware. So I have given the similarity here, and then I'm going to go on to talk about the differences between the two types of virus and worm, both malware. So just finishing up the response here, and then we'll wait and see what it says. So in my response, it's identified what I've done well. So it's talked about the points of the mark scheme that I would have hit. It's talked about a couple of small improvements, and then it's going on to ask. For this one, we're going to look at Google Gemini to summarize web pages. So for this example, we're using Google Gemini. I again have told it that I'm a GCSE computer science student doing some revision. I've previously collected the web addresses of some BBC bite-sized pages that I wanted to summarise. So I have said, can you please summarise these to help with my revision? And I'm just here adding a little bit of information to say, output it to the screen, but can you also create a PDF document for me so that I can download it and keep? And this obviously would be quite useful as a revision tool so that it builds up a bank of those PDF documents. So I've asked the question, it goes off and it looks at those BBC bite-sized pages, and when it then gives me my response, we should see some nice summary work, taking those pages, summarizing, so we've got a nice clear diagram there. And then as we scroll down, we can see that they have summarized the pages, dividing it up nicely into numbered bullet points. And then just underneath, we should see our PDF document nicely formatted, again with the same headings and the same information, so we can use that. This last example is how to use Quizlet to create flashcards. So Quizlet is a website for flashcards. I'm going to go to my specification document that I've got open. I'm going to copy everything from the specification into that box on the right-hand side. And then once it's had a think about it, it generates a set of some additional ways that AI can help. So the creation of practice questions, asking AI, generate 5 questions on a particular topic, make sure it's focused on the right specification and the right level. So for instance, generate me 5 questions on photosynthesis for GCSE biology, along with the mark scheme. This idea of being able to create resources and materials on demand is really, really helpful. Identifying the areas where students are weak and then producing materials to help support them with that, whether that's explanations, whether that's further questions. This idea that there is a particular topic that they feel they need to revise today, and then they don't have to wait to hear back from a teacher. They don't have to go and find the resources. They can use AI to create those resources for them. I've mentioned it before, but the idea of flashcards, so something like Quizlet, you can give it a bank of information. You can give it a PDF, for instance, with a summary of the specification or a summary of a topic, and Quizlet will create flashcards for you that you can then later use for revision. When using generative AI for revision, it's really important to remember kind of some of the real basic ways that we can use it. So for instance, personalized quizzing, that idea that you can tell the tool the areas that you particularly need to focus on, the areas where you might be particularly weak, the questions that you got wrong in a particular past paper, and then have it create similar questions, have it probe your understanding about those areas. It's really, really powerful because it's specific to the needs of the student. Using the idea of explaining it to me like I'm a 10-year-old, kind of taking those difficult topics, asking the AI to kind of rephrase it, to give different scenarios, but to explain something in a much easier to understand way. Students can also use these generative AI tools as a mock interviewer. So tell the tool what they want to discuss, what they want to kind of revise, and then the AI tool can probe and question them as if they were an actual tutor in the room, picking up on the misconceptions, asking for further explanations, really probing and checking for understanding. And then the last one of the four mentioned on this slide here is this idea of summarization. One of the real common techniques that students will use for revision is taking a set of notes and reducing it in length, turning it to something else, converting it, or summarizing it into a different format. And AI can really help with this by doing a lot of the heavy work for students. This is particularly useful for students who struggle to do these things, struggle to summarize, struggle to know which bits to take out of a large block of text. And so AI can do this and help produce those summaries that can then be useful later on in the revision process. Now, obviously, this is a bit of a tricky one because it is really useful for the students to do this summary themselves, this active revision process of reducing that big block into smaller kind of a table or details. But if they are really struggling to do that, then having AI can be really helpful. It is always important to remember there are potential downsides from the use of technology for revision like this. We can see on the screen here, I've listed a few. The first one, and it's important to remember, AI still will do what we call hallucinate. It will produce information that isn't necessarily correct, and it's important that students are aware of this. It could be that the AI tool has picked up information from a different specification. It may be from a different level, so it's maybe talking about A-level content when it should be talking about GCSE. It could be that it's getting particularly technical, or it could be that it's just made up something. It's conflated two bits of information. It's kind of generated some fact that isn't really true. And so it's really important that students are aware that this is a possibility. And that if something doesn't seem right, if something isn't what they remember from their notes, to double check and cross-reference to make sure that they are not suddenly learning incorrect information or hallucinated facts. Students obviously can become over-reliant, and obviously this is a thing that we're worrying about a little bit in the future. But this over-reliance on AI that could potentially prevent students from developing those skills themselves. We want students to know how to revise. We want students to know the techniques that work for them best. And if they are using AI to generate these content, to produce summaries, to produce the flashcards, there is the possibility that they might not develop those skills themselves. So we need to be aware of that. And just manage kind of our level of usage so that we can be aware. I still know how to do this. I still know how to kind of summarize a piece of text. I'm just using it in this instance because it's a piece of text perhaps I don't understand as well, and therefore I want a better summary from the AI tool. It's very easy from the outside as a parent to kind of ask about revision and have a student kind of go, oh, I made this lovely mind map, or I've made this page of notes, or I've got this summary. And one thing that we need to be mindful of is the use of AI to produce kind of really nicely polished, great looking resources, but that there hasn't been really enough thought and kind of engagement from the student themselves with them. So this idea of perhaps false confidence, whereby students are feeling really happy because they've got these lovely resources, but they haven't necessarily put in the work behind the scenes. And so again, it's important to remember these AI tools are there to support, not to replace their work effort. So a little bit of a summary on this slide here. Some examples of good use. So the idea of explaining topics, generating practice questions, using AI to test their own knowledge. All really good examples of how to be using AI to help with revision. In that red box, there are some examples of things that should be really avoided. We do not want to see students using AI to kind of create full paragraphs, full answers to then memorize, because that's not the best way of revising. That's not what's going to benefit them in the long run. We don't want to see students kind of replacing their revision techniques entirely with a AI generated summary or with a revision tool that they've used, because we need them to be doing that active engagement, because that's where the benefit and the work comes in. So in terms of supporting students and your children as they prepare for these exams, ask good questions. Things as simple as, can you explain it to me in your own words? Did you try it yourself first before you got AI to work out the answer? So just prompting some good questions so that when you are talking to your children, when you're talking to those students preparing, you are able to kind of be helpful and prompt those good responses. Checking for understanding. This question here, how do you know that answer is correct? When a student is working with AI and they get a response, asking that question, how do you know that the answer that AI tool has given you is correct, forces the student to think about, well, I know that because I know this fact and I know this fact, and therefore when we combine those, we know that we get, and it matches that truth that the AI has perhaps said. So getting them to think about that, getting them to think about the responses is really important. And then lastly, with revision, it is about understanding. It's not about just producing the answers. It's about the understanding that goes behind that. So whenever you're working with your child, whenever you are kind of trying to support or ask questions, think about the understanding that is going behind it, not just the verbatim responses, not just kind of those learned answers, but making sure that they have that understanding. So just to kind of sum up, AI can be a really helpful revision tool when it's used well. It can offer kind of clear explanations, practice materials. It's particularly useful for students who are studying independently, where they've perhaps exhausted the materials they've been given by the school, and they're looking for more questions or different types of questions. But it's important to remember that the use of AI tools is not a shortcut to success. It is a tool to support with that success. Thank you very much for listening. Good luck with everything. Hope the exam season goes as smoothly as possible.